Teachers' health and wellness as educators and allies of prevention, talks about that, blah, blah, blah. Most teachers believe they are at least partially responsible for their pupils' health and wellness and feel well placed to act as allies of prevention. How many of you have handed out tissues and said, blow your nose? How many have said, go wash your hands? Okay.
How many said, go home?
Yeah. Don't breathe on me.
You've got a fever, go home.
Okay, so that is physical health. How many of you have had students come in with a dark cloud over their head? Ever? Just last week. And the way I handle this a lot of times, I will say, obviously we're not going to be playing right yet. And if the cloud gets darker, I shut the door. And sometimes after 45 minutes and my student leaves, my husband says, wow, you didn't play much piano today, did you? But I get a phone call or a text from the parents saying, I don't know what you did, but thank you. Sometimes there is debriefing that goes on. There's teaching of all kinds and not just music. And if we're not mentally, emotionally healthy, then we have a hard time helping our students be that way. Anyway, I highly recommend reading the article. I don't want to take time on this. You've got your paper. I want you to draw. Oh, you didn't get a paper. I have a paper. Oh, that's okay. I don't want you to feel left out. Okay, so on your paper, you can see how well I drew a circle. It's oblong. Yep. Oh, these are really nice too. Okay. So you draw a circle, and you draw a tic-tac-toe in it. And you want to make it kind of big because we're going to be writing in it. Okay, now it says in these quadrants, PMS, every stinking month. It has nothing to do with PMS. It's just how we remember these letters. Okay, if P stands for physical, Michaela, what does M stand for, do you think?
Mental.
Excellent, mental. Caroline, what do you think S stands for?
Spiritual.
Yes, knocking me in the head. Spiritual. And, wow, maybe if I took it off of that, it would see better. And what do you think E stands for, Karen?
Emotion.
Very good. Emotional. Okay, up on the side somewhere on your medicine wheel, I want you to write 1-9. And then above that, write score. In each area I talk about, you're going to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 9. 1 being, I'm not very good at this, 9 being, I'm really good at it. Nobody's a complete failure, so there's no zeros. Nobody's totally perfect, so there's no 10s. On a scale of 1 to 9. I'm going to go through this fast, so think fast. Physical, how do you do taking care of your body? Do you use it? Do you abuse it? Do you take good care of it? Whatever. We're going to have so much fun here.
Keep it on, Sharon.
That would work. Okay, so give yourself a score. Write your score down there. Nope, I would just hold it.
Music stand.
No, let me hold it. I'll just hold it.
No, I'm good at this game. I'm good. See?
Will it go in that
Down
clip
away.
up there? Is- I don't know if this works.
Yeah, we're good. I don't want to waste the time. We're good. Okay, so I'm just going to give a random score here. Okay, mental. How do you do taking care of your mind? Do you make good choices? Do you control your thoughts? Do you have trouble controlling your thoughts? How do you do mentally? Do you like to learn? Are you a slug? Are you dumb? So I'll give myself a score there. Now, spiritual. How do you do living your religious beliefs? Come in. We'll catch you up really fast. How do you do living your spiritual convictions? It doesn't matter what religion you are, whether you believe in God or not. How do you do living what you believe spiritually? Do you say one thing? Do you do another? So, give yourself a score on 1 to 9. We'll just say. my score.
I'm with you. Oh,
Okay,
okay.
now,
You.
I'm just
Okay.
giving. Okay, now, emotional, don't score yourself yet, okay? Usually I teach this in the dirt when I take people horseback riding. Since we're not sitting in the dirt and I don't have rocks, I have a big rock that I put down on the ground and I say, women need to box up 90% of their emotions and throw them over the mountain. And the husband, if he's long, he'll elbow his wife, say, yeah. Oh, wait. And I have a bigger rock I put down. Men need to box up 100% of their ego and throw it over the mountain. Okay? Now, can men be emotional? Yes. Can women be egotistical? Yes. Decide which one you need to work on the most. So if you think, my brother went with me one time, and when I got to this part, he says, I don't agree with that. I'm like, that's when you are having problems. Anyway, so give yourself a score here. We'll say, okay, I won't tell you which one that has to do with, because it's not my score. Okay, so we've got these scores here. Now we're going up here with the alphabet. A, B, C, D, we already have the E's, and we have 2 F's. Okay, we're gonna score the same way. A is for attitude. What kind of attitude do you have? Do you look for the good? Do you see the bad? That is my score. I have a notoriously good attitude.
You do.
Most of the time.
Wait, is 9 good or is 1 good?
9. 1 is not good.
Oh.
So do you need to redo? Not good. 9 is good. Okay. Good thing I did that, huh? Now remember I said that this isn't my score. Okay, C, what do you think C is for? Karen knows, huh? Anybody? JT, be brave. What do you think? C?
Charisma?
Oh, that's a good one, but it's not. Okay,
Conversations,
communication.
communication.
How do you do communicating? Now, this is a really important one, and I'll get back to how this applies to our students. How do you do talking about how you feel? It's easy to talk until there's something at risk. And I tell this story a lot. When my husband and I met, we were lined up as dance partners at BYU. We were doing a couple of performances. After the last performance, we were going out to his car for him to drive me home. And he said, what would you like to do? And you have to know I was very enamored with him. And I said, I have a blind date tonight, but I'd rather be with you. That was risk, but it was more risk because my husband, who has not changed in 40 years of marriage, does not give an instant reply. And so it was silent for about 15 seconds. And I'm going, he's got a girlfriend, he's probably engaged, I am so stupid. I mean, really, that was the conversation in my head until he said, I would rather be with you too. What I've learned over 40 years is he was thinking about that poor guy who was getting left in the dust because we didn't have cell phones. I wasn't going home. We went out. And so I did stand up this young man, which I feel very bad about, but I got the better deal. So I was willing to risk. No, for me, I got the perfect deal for me. I don't know about for him, but he would have had a really rough life if he got me. Anyway, communication. Do you talk? Come in, Rachel. So, how do you do talking about your feelings when it's hard? I used to have a screw in my jaw, not literally, figuratively, and it would clamp shut whenever anything was at risk, because that's how I was raised. You do not talk. He who gets maddest wins. That's not a good way to be. And now I can't be quiet. My kids say, I know what we're putting on your tombstone. We need to talk. We do. It's my answer to everything. We need to talk. Okay, so communication. What's your score? Rachel, you came in. So on a scale of 1 to 9, you're going to 1 being not good, 9 being good. You're going to score yourself in each area. We've talked about most of these, but you can figure it out how you do. Okay, so, I skipped. I didn't do the alphabet. I was so excited about communication. Attitude, behavior. Here we go. B is for behavior. I like to call this integrity, but it doesn't fit with the alphabet. So, behavior. Do you say what you mean? Do you mean what you say? Can people believe you? Which is different than honesty. One time my daughter called about something difficult, and before I even answered her, I said, could you write a book on any given topic of what I would say? And she said, yeah. I said, good. Then my job's done. I will not change what I say. It's great. It makes life very simple. You write the book. I don't even need to write the book. You write it, because you know what I will say. I won't change what I say. I will always love you, but I won't change what I say. So, does your behavior reflect? Oh, and now I tell this to a lot of kids, younger teenagers. When I was 13, my family moved from about an hour away. For some reason, I thought I would be really cool if I had a potty mouth. And at 13, I had a really strong vocabulary. But I also talked in my sleep. And one time my brother gave me such a Trace, be quiet. You're swearing in your sleep. Because I had one set of words for home and another set for school. Do you have the same language wherever you are? Do you have the same dress standard wherever you are? Do you have the same attitude? I don't know. Just what is your behavior like? So, give yourself a score there. So we've done all these, A, B, C. Now we're down here to D. What do you think D is for? Not disco. Discipline. Anything can become an addiction. When I did this one time many, many years ago, my youngest son is 26. So, 20 years ago. And this cute little boy says, yeah, Mom, you're like addicted to the computer. I didn't throw 90% of my emotions over the mountain. I went, have you ever seen me play a game on the computer? No. I worked on the computer. I did work from home. And the kids would come home from school and I'd be typing away with headphones in my ears. And when the kids went to bed that night, my husband very gently said, remember alchemy? Oh, that was a game I would play when the kids went to bed. So he wasn't going to let me get away with that. So anything can become an addiction. How do you do keeping everything under control in your life? Okay, we've already done emotion and ego. Rachel, just choose which one to score yourself on, whichever one you need to work most on. But just give yourself one score here. Okay, and last, you know, every time I do one of these, I think, oh, this is my favorite. Oh, this is my favorite. Because each one of these are so beneficial. Okay, last is family and friends. And this is so good with our students too. How do you do in your relationships with your family? How do you do in your relationships with your friends? A lot of times these teenage students have better relationships with their friends than their family. One sweet little gal, so I do this with all of my students when we have group lessons. No, not all the time, but I make sure everybody gets it at least once. And then I ask them, what do you want to work on? And if they're brave enough to say what they want to work on. And this one little gal said, family and friends. And I said, why is that? Well, because I run cross country. And when I come home, I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm hungry. And I'm not very nice. And how about that, for her to be able to recognize that, to see what maybe she needed to improve on. And so, okay, so give yourself a score for family and friends. Okay, now, and you don't need to do it right now, your ultimate score doesn't really matter except when you're in a relationship. This would be terrible to do with your students, not in a relationship. With a spouse or somebody you want to marry, if you do this and then you compare scores, if you are 1 to 5 points away from each other, you'll have a great relationship. If you are 6 to 10 points, there will be some things you have to work out, but it can still work. If you are 11 to 15, you get into emotional abuse. You get higher than 15 and you get into physical abuse, and you better be running. And it's very interesting. This has played out time after time after time. Now, one time, the first time I did this with my husband, I was very concerned because I thought, what if our scores aren't close? We have a really good relationship, and it took me a few years to be willing to do it with him. We went out to dinner just before I ran my first marathon, and I said, okay, we need to do this. We were 2 points away from each other. I went, yes, I knew we had a good relationship. Now, when we were going down to California one time, taking all of our kids and a niece and nephew that were living with us, I gave everybody a piece of paper as we're driving in the van, and we did the medicine wheel on the way down. I said, I don't need to know your scores, but I want you to choose one area to work on for the week while we're gone. I didn't know what anybody chose. I did that. Well, a couple of days later, we are in line at Disneyland, and my then 16-year-old daughter said, hey, Mom, I bet you don't know what I chose to work on. And I said, sure I do. Typical 16, she says, no, you don't. I said, yeah, I do. She says, what? I said, you chose attitude. She says, oh, how did you know? What, are you kidding? You have been delightful, and you're usually a brat. Now, she is 29 and is expecting her 4th child and lives local, and she knows that I tell this story every time. I asked her the first time that I said, I hope it's okay if I tell this. She said, sure, because it's true. She knew she was a brat. But the beauty of this, and this is why it is so beneficial, and sometimes I still call her a brat. Actually, her husband says, would you call your mom, please? And she'll say, oh, am I being a brat? Because I can tell her she's being a brat. He cannot tell her. Anyway, so the beauty of this is when you decide what you need to work on, like Amelia, things will change. When my little student decided that she needed to work on family and friends because of what was going on, things changed. I checked with her a few different times, and her mom comes to her lessons and she says, oh yeah, she's doing much better because she identified the problem. And so as I talk to my students about this, I tell them, okay, now, if I sit there and say, you need to practice, you need to practice, you need to practice, you need to practice, you gonna practice more? And they all say, no. I said, I know, I can tell. But if you decide, I really need to do better, and you decide to practice more, to be more consistent, everything changes. And I've seen that too. So, now how does this apply to our students even more? Can you see how this might apply? I had a 13-year-old boy who was having some real severe difficulties, and that's how I started doing this with my piano students. I had taken him horseback riding, taught the medicine wheel, and his mom went, what happened? So when she came to his lesson, I did it again so she could see. And his whole life changed. He was number 2, little brother, and feeling less than. And not that anything was going wrong, very, very talented young man, but because of where he was emotionally. But as we look at all these things, and in this article in the magazine, talks about how we as teachers model. How can we teach our students something that we don't know? And it talks about this a lot in there, that whether it's performance anxiety and what did I do when I froze with the orchestra? And the orchestra restarted 3 times. I wanted to die, but I didn't. And my piano teacher, who had polio and was in a wheelchair, had driven an hour to come and hear me perform. And I was so embarrassed. But if you've never had those experiences, how do you relate to your student who's terrified? But when you can say, look what happened to me. Have you ever had this happen? And guess what? This actually works very well. It will make you better. Now something, and I've got part 2 that goes with this, but I have to give it to you. Stay there. Oh, look at this. Ah. What's on the floor that's so slippery? I could do
I don't know,
this.
I walked in today and it was slippery.
It's
Like sawdust.
drywall.
Oh, drywall dust.
The projector got ripped out of the wall and gets good.
Oh, very nice.
It wasn't me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We really believe that.
Now I have to show you something. So this is from the last time I did it, so I just covered this over. I'm not going to rip this off, but there's something underneath this that I would like to show you, but I'm not going to, just because I don't want to rip it. 7 years ago, you remember, Caroline? It was at your house. We had our chapter meeting just after my son had died. And I still remember that fog, but I knew I needed to be there. It was a hard time. Well, right, so we buried Denzel on Saturday. On Monday night, we had our duet recital. And I had parents calling saying, we don't need to do this, we don't. I'm going, are you kidding? Of course we need to do this. These kids are prepared, we're not doing it. But it was so cool. And so what's under here is the picture collage that we had done for the funeral. And so I brought it and I put it on an easel, and on the program I retyped up and said in remembrance of, or in memory of, Roderick Denzel Hunt. And so even the recital going on was an example of being resilient, being able to handle hard things. We model for our students so much. And it's vital. And so as you apply this in your life and see what you can improve on, so maybe I would say, oh, I have a 3 for emotion and ego. I probably better work on my emotions this week. And you do it for 1 week. And you see improvements in 1 week. And there have been times that first thing on the piano lesson assignment book, I say, what are you working on? And they'll choose something. And it doesn't take any time at all, but because we've done this. And I've had some very interesting responses. One young man, 15 years old, in front of everybody said, I need to work on spiritual. I said, that is great. And I did not ask till his lesson when he was alone. We had a very, very good conversation. And 6 months later, he's doing great. But it was a concern that he had. Wasn't doing anything bad. But this helps. And so many of the kids come up with communication. And it's really important, I think, to explain to our students, why do you have a hard time talking to me when you come in and I say, so, how was your day? Fine? Good? Okay. I said this to my grandson. Okay, 30 words. I went to school and I drew he counted 30 words, but he talked. So I point out to him, how old are you? 12, 15? How long have you been speaking? Okay, say you were talking at 2, so that's 10 years. How long have you been paying attention to how you feel inside? How long have you been willing to share what you're feeling with someone else? Maybe that hasn't even happened yet. So, do we expect a 9-month-old baby to be able to say, Mom, I want a peanut butter sandwich? No, it's probably not going to happen. You're learning how to talk. You're learning how to identify your feelings. So when the black cloud comes in and I say, does it have to do with something that happened at school? No. Does it have to do with at home? No. Does it have to do with piano? Yes. Does it have to do that you haven't practiced? Yes. Does it have to do, so do you see how, instead of saying, what's the problem? You help them learn to identify their feelings. Okay, so this one little gal that was working on Family and Friends, she came in a couple of weeks ago with her assignment book, you know, the spiral assignment book, and it was obviously water damage. It was bad. And I'm flipping through going, what happened to your book? And she said, my brother left his water bottle in the car and it got all over it and on her music and everything. I went, well, that stinks. How'd you feel about your brother? Not very good. I said, yeah, I understand. Okay, well, let's see if we can make this work. And then just a minute into this, I said, so, do you always keep your piano books in the car? And she looked at me like I was weird. No. So, that your brother's water bottle spilled on your books and ruined your books makes you a victim, right? So you're mad at your brother. Oh, but wait, who left their books in the car? And her mom is cracking up over on the couch. Said, so do you think you will ever leave your books in the car again? Maybe not. And this is the beauty of all of this too. When we are victims, we have no power. Life happens to us. And when our piano students learn this, it's a great lesson. They're not victims. They determine how well they do with piano. They determine how they look at life. They have so much power. They may not get to decide what they have for dinner, maybe, more or less. They can decide whether to eat or not. But I think it's so important for us to model for our students, you are in charge of you. I can teach you all of this. I can't sit there and make your fingers work. You have to decide if you're gonna follow the coach and do what I tell you to do so that you can progress. But this is your monkey, not my monkey. And so when they start learning this very important life skill at piano lessons, that's when parents call and say, whatever you did, thank you. Okay, now, with this, maybe I'll get a different color here. There is an affirmation that goes with each one of these. And a lot of times I ask my students, do you know what an affirmation is? No. Well, it's like a positive statement. I am learning my Mozart sonata this week. I am learning my Mozart sonata this week. Now, it's not I hope, it's I am. And then it reinforces to yourself what you need to do that. So, attitude. Now, when we're out on our ride, we have to do something. We're gonna do it here. Okay. You see, is that exuberant? We're gonna say it all together and we have to yell it.
Yeah.
You ready? 1, 2, 3. I am a winner! That was pretty good. Okay, when we're a winner, when we know that we have incredible potential, I make good choices. All right? When we make good choices, when we're a winner, I am confident and enthusiastic long words. Okay, physical. This one, I want you to underline the I. This is really, really important. I am responsible. It goes back to we are not victims. We are responsible for what we do, who we become. I am responsible. Behavior is I do it now. We don't put things off. We don't postpone. We don't wait for the perfect time. If you wait for the perfect time to practice, it probably won't happen. You have to make it and do it now. Spiritual. I am obedient. Obedient. Discipline. I call this Denzel's Corner with all the D's. I don't stop. Semicolon. I never give up. That's a good practice one too. Okay, emotion, ego. This is one of my favorites. It is powerful. I release all doubt and fear. If you believe in God, go to the scriptures. What does it say? God is not a God of fear. We don't have to be afraid. He doesn't want us to be afraid. Even in our performing, we don't need to be afraid. But it also says, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. So get prepared and don't be afraid. Okay? And then family and friends, I, underline, am my own best friend. And this is a really important thing for kids to learn too. How can you be a good friend to anyone else if you don't like yourself? We need to start at home first. When we start working and improving, why does that look like Christmas? When we like ourselves, it's amazing how the rest of the world looks better. When we don't like ourselves, the world looks awful. So, now, yes?
My one grandchild, his mommy, my daughter-in-law, she holds him up in the bathroom after his bath with his towel on and says pretty much that it's almost, she's let us watch a couple times, so she calls it affirmation and just tells him, I can do hard things, I do, it's really amazing.
That's cool.
And I'm like, of course, several months ago he didn't understand,
Right.
but he's understanding more, and that's amazing.
Well, and as parents, as teachers get in this consistent habit of reinforcing these beautiful, important lessons, it will bless our students' lives, our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives. It is so, so powerful.
Patrice? So the one I am a winner on attitude, I think for a lot of kids you need to clarify that a little bit, because I can see them in their head thinking, no, I'm not a winner, I lost that game or I lost that competition. I think you need to explain that we're trying to talk about as our attitude. If you showed up to the competition or the performance or the festival or you're practicing and you did put forth your best effort, that is
a lot more.
Winning in knowledge. And
you didn't maybe get the prize, but you won everything because you overcame, you pursued, you showed up.
I just think it's good to explain that to them, because a lot of kids see things very black and white, and they might say that out loud, and inside they're thinking,
No, I'm
that's
not.
not true.
I think that's a great point.
About that.
Okay, do you have any other input, questions, things that you think, ways that this can apply?
I saw a YouTube video not too long ago, and a teacher, I just broke down. In her class of 25, every morning when they got in there, I don't know if she touched them, you have to be careful, and did this with each child. And then they went in the room and sit down, and she said she does it every day, and the changes are,
She had a picture of a face, which was a smile, or a handshake, or a hug. So the child determined what they wanted. And so they pointed to the picture, and so she would shake their hand. or she would give them a hug after the child said, by pointing to the picture, what they wanted, giving the child power and acknowledging that power. And yet, is the child going up to come up and say, Mrs. Hunt, I have a really bad day at home. Can you just give me a hug so that I know I'm loved? No, they're not. But when you ask a few questions, was it hard at home this morning? Is it okay if I give you a hug? Because sometimes we just need a hug. Yes, you know. And so now I will tell one other thing, if I can do this without bawling. So one of my sweet students, she and I had gone horseback riding together, and that's when this came out. I said, so what was the best part of the week? What's the worst part? A lot of times I'll ask students, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part? And you know, it just gives them an avenue to vent. And I was so surprised at what came out. She said, well, going horseback riding was the best. I'm going, oh, thank you, I thought it was the best too. The worst, and it was so hard for her, and I just waited. My mom and dad are fighting, and I think they're getting divorced. They almost got divorced once before, because my dad had a pornography problem. And he spends all this time on his phone rather than be with the family. And I'm worried that he's got a problem again. Now, as a piano teacher, can I fix that? No, I can't. But was she able to at least air her concerns? So many things are bottled up in these sweet kids. And then I was able to say, with a lot of help of inspiration, there isn't anything that you can do to change your dad or the situation with your mom and dad. But something that if you feel like you could do this, it may be very beneficial to you and to your dad. Why don't you take the time sometime to write down on a card the things you admire about your dad? He works hard. He provides for your family. You've never had to live on the street. You've always had food. I'm sure you can come up with all kinds of things. And write down all the things that you are grateful that your dad does, or how you feel about your dad. And then you could say very gently, Dad, I'm worried. I'm really worried that pornography is a problem, and I don't want it to be a problem, but I want you to know that I love you. And that is about all a kid can do. Is it wrong for a child to have those feelings, those fears? No. What's wrong is when there's no avenue to get it out, in my humble opinion. And so, how many times as piano teachers are we the only avenue to help these kids that were saying, why can't you play that C minor scale right? You gotta be kidding me. Perhaps we are the avenue to help them understand themselves better, to understand a lot of the world better, and when they do, the avenue for music is opened up.
Well, have we ever considered that sometimes we are the only mentor?
Yeah.
I've had students I've taught till they've graduated from high school, and I've calculated, wow, I've taught them for 8 years, every single week, 45 minutes to an hour. No other adult in their life, maybe even not their parent, has spent one-on-one time with them that consistently for that many years. I mean, that's powerful.
It is very powerful.
Yeah.
Well, and this, you're creating a safe space for them.
When they know.
And they do know.
This sweet,
Patrice, you're amazing.
oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
This black cloud that came in last week. And so in March, we are having Emily Jorgensen present, the gal up in Provo Orm who lost her fingers,
Oh, wow.
piano teacher, lost them to sepsis. She goes in the hospital for pneumonia, comes out minus all of her fingers, only has her thumbs. And when I saw that picture, I printed it out, and that picture sits on my music fall board. Anyway, and so all last week I talked to every one of my students about this and said, and my little 10-year-old said, but Mrs. Hunt, she looks happy. She has that radiant smile. I said, and so, even when we have really hard struggles, we can still decide whether we are happy or not, even when maybe we're sad. And so, and just because someone has a smile on their face doesn't mean they're not dealing with hard things. And so, just some real powerful stuff. So when this black cloud comes in, he sits down and he takes that picture and he flips it around. He is not going to look at somebody who has worse problems than him. But it was so sweet. By the time he left, and his mom texted and said, "How was his lesson?" And I found out 2 days later when she came over what had taken place to make the black cloud. I'm going, I'm surprised I'm still alive. But he left happy and not dark. And so I just think, and yes, we played. We didn't talk even. I don't want to talk about, okay, then let's play your polonaise. And it's just therapeutic. It's wonderful. Were you going to make a comment?
I just was going to say, this is really cool. In my particular church, addiction is a huge problem. And so we've had a lot of addiction recovery training as leadership and just in the ward in general. And so much goes totally with this. It's amazing. And I think one of the things that keeps coming up is that addiction starts because we have this false belief that happens usually when we're a child at some point. And I can very much see that even in my own life, some of that actually came from piano lessons. And if we can do this, we can stop having those false beliefs continuing through generations. And that's pretty cool.
It's powerful.
Sorry.
No, that's
this is really an emotional cool thing.
It is an emotional thing. And this is why I swore I would never teach, because of that, some of that emotional baggage. I was terrified that I would repeat history. And so I told my husband I need a piano, a rocking chair, and a sewing machine to be happy. And he reminds me that I am happy. Because I have a piano, yeah. Well, when that piano came down the hill, we lived in southeastern Utah, came down the switchbacks, it hit me. And I told my husband, and we had a 9-month-old baby, that was it. And I said, our children are not allowed to play the piano. And my very kind husband said, okay. And it was a gut-wrenching feeling. And it took 8 years for that oldest child to beg me, Mama, please, can't I please have piano lessons? And I was terrified. And so I gave him a coupon, because coupons are free. I gave him a coupon for 1 year of piano lessons, not to see how he would do, to see how I would do, if I would repeat history, or if I would change history. And I changed history. And so, again, are we able to model for our students? Just because this is written in stone doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. We still get to interpret how we live what's written there. There's a cool petroglyph that has a story with it, but I turned the story around. And so instead of it ending in the death of the warrior jumping off the cliff, it ended in a marriage proposal. So, with that, I'll say, wait, before you go, here. There you go. We are just about done. So, you guys will pass those around. This is the Affirmations. And this is what I just taught you. So that you can actually go home and teach this to your family, to your students, to whomever, and or refresh yourself on the medicine wheel. When we went on this trip, my niece and nephew were 8 points away from the family. The rest of my family was within 2 or 3 of each other. After they had lived with us for 1 year and 3 years, they were within 2 points. So you tend to reflect what you're around. You will, whether you like it or not, you are mirroring to your students